Spy Hunter was probably one of the more interesting arcade games of 1983. In an era where Pac-Man derivatives were still a dime a dozen, here was a game that let you bring out your inner James Bond, cruising down an endless highway, doing in the bad guys with guns and gadgets, and right near the end of the Roger Moore era of films. Of course, any hit arcade game would get ports, but this being 1983, they couldn't exactly be great, or even that faithful, and don't worry, it's not as though console game publishers were raking in the dough anyhow. Thanks, Atari. Today, though, we'll be having a look at the NES port from 1987. Yes, 1987. It was a 4-year-old game by then, and had also gotten a sequel in arcades that same year. This is, however, as much as I'm willing to diss it, because this is a great port, giving people the chance to play a pretty convincing version of the arcade original to the best of the NES's ability. Gameplay, as you can imagine, consists of driving down an endless extent of highway, thwarting enemy vehicles, and trying not to die in a horrible high-speed accident, which will happen anyway and probably more times than you can count. You, the player, possibly the titular spy hunter or some 007 adjacent character, driving the fictional G6155 Interceptor, which, according to the art, is probably based off of, and this took a bit of research, the Mercedes-Benz CW311, a concept car from 1978, kitted out with machine guns. And controlling the car is simple. Up makes you accelerate, down decelerates, left and right turns, A fires the machine guns, which you always have, and B activates whatever special weapon you currently have. And you will be using those weapons. There are a number of enemies you'll be dealing with as you drive. Large, bulky cars that'll ram you off the road and are bulletproof, regular-sized cars that can slash your tires, causing you to spin out and crash, and limos that'll shoot you as they drive past. Helicopters that'll drop bombs, and worst of all, civilians that just get in your way and make your constant point scroll stop momentarily if you kill them. Thankfully, though, your machine guns aren't all you have. I mean, I literally just said that, but whatever. At various points along your drive, you may come across one of 3 types of red weapons vans, which you'll have to try to drive into the back of. It could take a bit of finagling at times, but once you do, you'll be granted with one of 3 limited special weapons. Oil slicks that'll let you slip up cars behind you, a smoke screen that basically works the same as the oil slick, but takes up the entire width of the road, though it's far less efficient. With the oil slick, you can just quickly press the button and spit out only a little bit, conserving it for as long as you can. The smoke screen comes out all at once when you press the button, and you only get 3 charges, so you have to be very judicious. And finally, there are the missiles for when you want to blow stuff up. They are, in fact, not for the helicopters, and the 2 times I tried, it didn't work. You can also switch to a boat form at certain points, though the one time I actually got that far, it lasted for all of 4 seconds. Yeah, that's my bad though. Naturally, it is a bit of an addicting game. While recording, there was always this slight mental push of just one more whenever I got a game over. It's simplistic, but even still, it's great fun. The visuals, while not as good as the arcade original, that's just the limits of the NES, I'm afraid, it still looks rather good. Everything is clearly defined and pronounced, it's easy to distinguish enemy vehicles from civilians, the small bursts of flame from the rear end of the car gives you a good indication to speeding up, and the music, while again not as good as the arcade version, still gives about as good a rendition of the electronic arrangement of Harry Mancini's theme to Peter Gunn as the NES can give. Now, this is all well and good, but I do have one slight issue. The game is, as one could expect, difficult. It doesn't take much to spin off into a crash, going just a little too fast with a civilian right in front of you. Well, I hope you have AAA, cause it's not gonna go well. This is, of course, part of the challenge of the arcade version. However, the cabinet features a gear shift, like a lot of driving games then and now. The NES doesn't sport such a feature. Not that I'm blaming Sunsoft for this, I wouldn't expect them to make a custom controller just for one game and nothing else. The annoying part is that the gear shifting is entirely absent from the NES version. Instead, you merely accelerate and brake. I often found myself dying simply because I failed to slow down in time to not rear-end the car ahead of me. And being able to instantly slow down by shifting gears is something I think could have negated that. However, I do still question how it would be implemented if it were present. The NES only has so many buttons after all, so not having shifting is just an unfortunate consequence of this particular port. Not that it diminishes how good the game is, though. That aside, Spy Hunter for NES is a phenomenal arcade port, and while it doesn't rework the game in any huge ways for the console, unlike a lot of arcade ports on NES at this point, it would see a sequel in Super Spy Hunter, a game that was actually entirely unrelated in its original Japanese release. So while it doesn't do anything particularly new for NES, it does still give a good port of a great arcade game.